hop in because I got a lot to say. So much to say. So we're talking about Skinamarink from 2022, and it is about two children wake up in the middle of the night to find their father is missing, and all the windows and doors in their home have vanished. And it's directed by Kyle Edward Ball. So I watched Skinamarink in what I believe to be the best possible way, and I'm so sorry, Kat, I did not watch it with you first.
I know.
But I'm also really glad I didn't pass on it. It was something that it just wasn't ever going to work for you.
Yeah.
So it
and I mean, you
of,
watched it with an honorary Ghouls, so it's fine.
Exactly. So, what I believe to be the best possible way, which is on a cold, gloomy Monday night in a forgotten theater in New Jersey with one of my best friends who is an avid horror fan, as I explained, both geeking out about paranormal activity. Anyone who actually genuinely appreciates paranormal activity, the first one, for what it is, like, they get me. So we were, on top of it being like cold, gloomy Monday night, like it was raining, it was like a little chilly. We were the only ones in the theater, which amplified the horror, but it also allowed us to fully experience the film, and we were able to talk about what we were feeling in the moment and try to make sense of the darkness around us, which, if anyone has watched a movie with me, I'm an avid talker in movies. I know it's a curse. I know people hate it, but it is something I do. It's how I just work through things. And so it was nice to be able to almost operate as if I was at home, but in this huge theater. And we were, curled into ourselves, hiding from the intense silence that was mixed with these jarring sounds every now and again. Our interpretation of the world became twisted as rooms turned upside down and plunged us into darkness. And we quickly became concerned for the safety of the two kids on screen, but also for our own safety in the deep, dark theater. Like, I really felt like I was there. And I was like screaming out for the kids, like, don't go up there. Like, Kevin, are you okay? I felt so connected to them. And at the same time being like, what is going on? What's happening to us? Because we were there with them, essentially abandoned in our own way. You know how dark theaters get, where you you just see the one glowing exit sign, and that's what we had. So it was an experience. And as a camera
cut, I'm sure, like, I'm sorry, I'm just like, I'm sure, like, cacophony, like the sounds just had to hit so much harder being in like a big space by yourself.
They're so loud, and they were to the point where at the end of the film, so by the end, I was just so stressed. Like, I was so tense. For the entire film, you are tense, and there's no reprieve because you constantly don't know what's going on because of the way that the film is shot. You are just wondering what is actually happening, what's happening outside of our vision that we're not allowed to see. And it just amplified. And then there's the crinkling of the static on screen, plus like the sounds that would like come in jarringly loud at random times. Like, you can kind of expect when it would happen, but most often it was like abrupt. And so there's just, by the end of it, both me and Jeff were sitting like scrunched up in the chairs with our hands over our ears, and mine like occasionally over my eyes, where I'd have to watch through my fingers because I was just so like, I was just so tense. And so both of us were just like curled up like, oh no, what's happening? And honestly, we left that feeling like that was probably the best way to experience such a film, because it was so absurd. And as the camera cut to other views, familiar hallways in the house, we could see them transform from the harmless dark house into a potential home of some unknown, not quite seen monster hiding safely in the dark. And there was a, running gag for me that there was a particular hallway, and every time they went to that hallway, it freaked me out because I was convinced that something was there, even though I'm fairly certain nothing was. But every time it cut to that hallway, I was like, oh no, it's the hallway again. It's that hallway again. And I know there's something watching me in there. And it's not. That's not how films work.
And like at varying angles and zooms too, which just like added so much to that fear, because it's like you have that graininess and you're just experiencing that like scary shifting darkness. It like didn't feel still. So like I totally agree with you that it felt like something was like in that hallway even if there wasn't.
Yeah, they were very clever about the static because it does make your eyes kind of see things that weren't there.
Yeah.
You know, when you stare at like a bright thing and then you look away, you still see like the
The dot
imprint
from the
of
bright
it.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like that. Plus, you know, sometimes they would just be clever with the shadows so that it looked like a person there, or they would cut into, like they just like cut in deeper into the darkness, and you're like, why are you doing that? It's just so good. It's
Stop.
stupid good.
Yeah.
So, having rewatched the film at home with Kat midday, I could say with certainty that there was a magic present in my first watch that I lacked in my second, and I do really worry that it may have affected your interpretation or even the severity of the film, Kat. So I
Yeah.
apologize that we weren't submerged in complete darkness, but we were alone, and I was, you know, there to scold you into watching so you could feel a little scared. So
I think the fear was still there because it was like we watched it in midday, but it like got dark by the end of it. And then we were like just sitting alone in the house and we're like, all right, well now I'm scared to go upstairs.
mm-hmm.
And like stuff like that. So like it still did hit for me. It's probably just like not as hard as it did when you watched it in the theater. But I will say I was still pretty scared.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
worried. I was like, I hope I didn't ruin this for you. Because I'm really glad that Skinamarink got a theatrical release, though it was short, like a short run. And I do recommend that folks see it in any way that they can. And if you are watching it on Shudder somewhere at home, do it with friends in a darkened space with the sound turned up too high to get the full experience.
Yeah.
just plunge yourself into the darkness and let it ruin when you go home and have to go to the bathroom at night. And you're like, has my hallway always been this sinister? I don't know. I don't remember there being ghosts back there, but I guess there are.
Yeah.
So let me tell you what Skinamarink is about, and then I'm going to dive into some of the theories because it is an experimental film and a lot of people have interpretations. I will say I watched it the first time without any interpretation. I didn't know anything besides the walls, the doors and windows disappear and there's two kids.
Yeah.
I had heard brief ideas, but I had no idea, and so when I went in, it was really stressful because I had no idea what was going on. I do think that in my second watch, having looked into what was going on, it helped inform some of the decisions and scenes that I was seeing that helped me appreciate it even more. So, you know, there are spoilers when I get to the hypotheses of people, their, you know, thesis of what the film might be about. And you know, it's totally up to you, but you can absolutely skip that part. Or it might actually help with you appreciating the film from that lens, or at least getting over the incredibly experimental view. Like, if you need a thread, like if you need a plot, then let me give you one because there isn't one. Straight up.
Otherwise, yeah.
Yeah. So Skinamarink is a bizarre and disquieting film about interpreting the darkness with a young mind, following two siblings, Kevin, who is 4 years old, and Kaylee, who is 6 years old. These are babies. As they discover their father missing, the doors and windows removed, and themselves ultimately alone in the darkness. And the film is experimental with strange angles, focusing the camera on areas we don't often linger on in film or life. And because of these shots, focus on the corners above or below our standard vision, viewers are always left with only interpretations of the world around us. The film cycles through these stagnant shots, bringing us to different areas of the house, and sometimes with no rhyme or reason, and often against our will. Like that dang hallway. Every time we came back, I was like, stop, don't make me do it.
I don't want to be here.
Or it's like, what's really this is something that people talk about often. It's these shots that are just like the corner of the room and it's the ceiling. And
Yeah.
I would say, like, if it were specifically from the point of view of children, I think we'd have a lot more like low shots. It's just supposed to be these weird, jarring, angles that make you uncomfortable
Yeah.
because it's not the way we perceive the world, and because you're being cheated. You don't get to see what's in this room. You only get to see that corner. So you have to wonder what's in the rest of this room, because that corner is really scary. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like, what else is
Your
there?
brain does the work, I'm telling you.
It's so good. Yeah, I can't wait to hear your section, Kat. So the story starts with Kevin wandering the halls after bedtime, and we never see Kevin's face or Kaylee's or anyone's. We only catch glimpses of their feet or the back of their head. At one point, we do see Kaylee's face, but we don't see Kaylee's face. I will explain.
Yeah.
But at this point, Kevin sits in the hallway looking up to someone or something before going to his sister's room to ask to play. We hear a child counting as if playing hide and seek before a fall leads to a wailing cry. And we can interpret that Kevin is then taken to the hospital while Kaylee waits at home. And upon their return, their father is heard on the phone with presumably their mother and informs them that Kevin had had a fall but is okay, not even needing stitches. After this, the kids wake to find their father is gone. It's still dark. And as they wander the house, trying to figure out what to do next, they notice the doors and windows zap out of existence and they're replaced with wall. It's a weird, like, child's like approach to something that's honestly terrifying for me.
Yeah.
Because it makes us like wall 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 think, and then it's like gone. So and that's like a repetitious sound that we hear that could be linked back to the cartoons, which I'll explain. There's some cartoons that mirror what's happening to the kids in the film, but these sound effects are very reminiscent of the cartoons that they're listening to, very reminiscent of just like childlike sounds matched up with something that is absolutely terrifying, which I didn't write this in the script, but just as like one of the more horrifying things that I thought of when I was watching this film was there was this one time so I shared a room with my older sister, and she had, her favorite color is lime green. So our room was painted lime green, which at night, like if the moon was, coming in, looked pretty white. Like it was just fully white. Like scary.
Yeah.
And I woke up in the middle of the night and I had to pee. And so I like got down from my bunk bed and I was trying to go to the bathroom, and the door just wasn't there. Like our bedroom door was just gone. Like I'm feeling around for it and it's gone. Like I felt around the whole room and it's just blank wall. It's just white wall everywhere. And I was like, I know the door should be over here. I was so terrified. I was like 9. And then I like climb back up onto my bed and I'm just like, I'm just gonna go to sleep and hopefully the door is there when I wake up. And it was, and it's never happened again, but it was like something that has stuck in my brain for forever. So when those doors started to disappear, it brought me right back to that very specific moment of just being like, okay, we're just going to go to sleep and the the glitch in the Matrix will fix itself. Because somehow I got trapped in here and I need to get out.
Oh my gosh. Nightmares of kids. It's like so real. That sounds so scary, Gabe. I'm sorry you experienced that. Okay. I hope you never experience that in adulthood.
I think it would be worse if it was in adulthood, because I don't know if my reaction would be to go to sleep. My reaction would be like, I'm trapped forever and I will die. So
yeah, fair enough.
So yeah, I hope for the sake of my house that I'm not trapped in it at any point. So at this point, the kids see the walls and they're instead of doors and instead of windows. And it's funny because you could see that there had been a window there because there's the shade, like the window shade, but then you look behind it and there's no window. So what happened? And the kids are just like, what was that? Like they're always whispering, and there's only sometimes subtitles when we were in the theater, which was really aggravating. So I was thankful that watching it at home, I could have subtitles all the time, which means I got to understand some more things. A big advocate for subtitles always, even in theaters. So the windows zap out of existence. There's a wall now. And then the phone is also disconnected, they find, leaving them truly alone in the home. Because they're, like I said, their father's missing, the doors are missing, the phone does not connect them to the outside world. So they make camp in their living room with only toys, snacks, a TV playing old cartoons, and each other for company. Because that's a kid's coping mechanism. Like, they're like, could we sleep down here? And I was like, 100% we're gonna be together. So as the film progresses, the kids start to hear a strange voice that begins making requests of them in the darkness. It tells them to go upstairs, to go downstairs, to play with it, and even hurt themselves. And something is there in the darkness stealing their toys, and eventually, even Kaylee's face. I did mention that we see Kaylee's face, quotation marks, because we don't see Kaylee's face. This thing steals it. So viewers are left to interpret not only the story, but what we're seeing just flat out. The answers seem to be just out of view if only we could fix the camera. And just outside of our periphery is the darkness moving? Is there a face in that shadow? Is this voice real? What is happening to poor Kaylee and Kevin? Where's their dad? What happened to their mom? What does the 572 days text at the end mean? What is any of this?
Yeah.
You are going to wonder. The beauty of films, especially something as experimental as Skinamarink, is that the answers are whatever you want them to be. Because in the end, Skinamarink, in forcing you to stare into the darkness, to be shrouded in the disquiet and jarring alarming noises, to drown in the VHS static on the screen, reduces us back to a childlike understanding of the world. It unlocks a horror unique to young brains, left to interpret the shadows as something potentially monstrous. Like, I don't know what that is, but it's probably something scary. And when the film finished in the theater, we were frozen in our seats. The credits were in the beginning, so there's no real indication that the film was over, except for the absence of that VHS static. And after we left, Jeff and I both experienced a new relationship with the dark. And Kat, you also had that relationship after we watched it, where the hallways and rooms of our own homes that we're familiar with had transformed into new, uncertain, and terrifying spaces. We pondered if the hallway had always been this dark, this ominous, and full of potential terror. I took pictures. I took a picture of my hallway. I was like, is it always this scary?
Yeah.
And I felt at once returned to a youthful consciousness of the world and of the moving shadows around us. I became aware of how I'd grown into either dismissing or simply not acknowledging darkness in my adulthood. It made me respect darkness in a new way.
Respect out of fear. Yes.
Exactly. And the potential. Like, I think the same way with like an incessant noise, we can often, if it's droning, we can drown it out, right? Our brain can like decide that's not important. And so we don't we can have the power to not focus on it. Some of us who have mesophobia might hyper focus on it or spicy folks, but oftentimes our brain does do some good work in drowning out some of those exterior noises or just like unnecessary information.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what the dark is for us as adults, is that we've drowned out the potential of fear. And because it's like, well, we don't need that. But we do need it. So,
or you never did and you've always been scared of the dark.
Yeah, which is totally valid. You can be afraid of the dark. There's potential in there.
That's why Lights Out is my literal nightmare. Continue.
Such a good short. So I'm going to get into some of the interpretations and theories that fans have of the film. I will say there are going to be spoilers in this section because to explain why people think what they think and some of the scarier things, they're going to do that. So feel free to skip ahead to Kat's section instead of getting spoiled here. Or like I said, it might help to give yourself some kind of motivation for what is happening in the story to fully immerse yourself in it and not be like like angry that you don't know what's happening. Or you might also be someone who really, really digs that. I will say there's no real like twist or anything. It's just an experience, and I think you get that regardless of what you know to be true, because none of this is true and all of it is true. So, because of the experimental nature of this film, there's no one explanation for what is occurring on screen, and the story is something viewers piece together for themselves. Director Kyle Edward Ball has not explained his own motives outside of confirming that everyone is right and wrong in their interpretation, saying, first of all, every fan theory is true, and every fan theory is false. Someone had a theory that I'm the monster, and then someone had a whole theory based around the dollhouse that appears in the movie, that they're all in the dollhouse. That's so neat, right?
That's
like,
fun.
it is neat. There's also like different names for the monster. There's like the voice in the dark, the monster, the Skinamarink, Kyle Edward Ball, whatever it is. So
Yeah.
if you, like me, were scrambling for some meaning behind the film to help shape what you'd seen into something understandable, then here are some of the popular theories by fans online. And remember, these theories are all true and false. So feel free to find which story works best for your own reasoning. So let's dive into those spoilers. So one of the first ones I see pretty popular, people kind of lean into this, and it was one of the first ones I saw when I was trying to figure out what the heck was going on. So it is one that people do enjoy. And this is a theory that stems from the opening scenes containing some of the only dialogue in the film. There's a very few dialogue scenes. So after Kevin had fallen and hurt himself, resulting in a quick hospital run, Kevin's father tells someone on the phone that Kevin is fine. The theory people have come up with is that Kevin's fall was very much not all right, and instead Kevin's fall caused severe damage to his brain, and he is now in a coma. In an article on Signal Horizon titled Skinamarink Explained, Child Abuse, Death, and the Monsters of Our Youth, writer Tracy Palmer explains, Kevin did fall down the stairs, but he is likely not okay. The poor child is almost certainly severely injured, and everything that happens from that point forward is the imagined nightmare of a damaged mind. And further, Palmer connects Ball's previous film, Heck, to this one as its spiritual successor, saying, one of Ball's previous shorts, Heck, from which this movie was based, deals with the same subject matter, although in a slightly different manner. Everything from feeling trapped to the number of days displayed at the bottom of the screen late in the movie is an indication that the boy is in a coma and has been for over a year. I did mention there being 572 days. That's what I knew. So I will explain that. So the events that unfold after this call, the disappearing doors and windows, the voice in the dark, and some of the truly haunting scenes of discussions between Kaylee and her parents are explained as Kevin's interpretation from his coma. So he is trapped, much like he is in the film, unable to control his own body and forced to obey an unknown voice. The conversations he hears are of his loved ones, just out of reach, and he is only receiving pieces of those conversations. The repetitive cartoons on the TV could be what the family has left on for him while he is under, hoping to offer some comfort in this dark mental space. And the idea is that the text, so at the film, the only text we see on screen after like a torrent of just unsettling imagery is, it says 572 days with like no context. Nothing else happens, and you're like, what does that mean? The theory is that it is telling us how many days Kevin has been in a coma. And at the end of the film, the voice in the dark tells Kevin to sleep. It says, go to sleep. And this is perhaps asking Kevin to finally let go and move on. So that's one theory. The next theory is also incredibly popular with people online and was one that when I was watching with Kat, it's the one that I was leaning towards, and so it did inform some of my interpretations that second watch, because I was kind of looking for where this was, because it kind of makes sense to me, but then it also doesn't. So after I explain what it is, I'll explain why it sort of doesn't. So another theory from viewers is even darker than Kevin's coma. Based on the absence of their mother and a vehemence from Kaylee against even talking about her, it's clear something scary has occurred between the children and their mother. The parents are clearly separated, and when thinking of the phone call between their father and the person on the phone, presumed to be their mom, that he is letting them know as a courtesy. It definitely felt like, at the very least, these are two people who are separated. like, oh, don't freak out. He starts the
Yeah.
call saying that. And there's a hesitance in his voice, an uncertainty as to what he will be met with when sharing this bad news. And he's working very hard to downplay what is happening. So even if he isn't actually hurt, he's working really hard to
Make it
drive
not
that
seem
home
like a big deal.
before. Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's all good, everything's fine, we're okay. I'm just telling you because it's the right thing to do to tell you. When the house
Yeah.
first begins to change and the children are alarmed, they call out for their father, not their mother, which a lot of people thought was bizarre. And I get it. I mean, it seemed like they were pretty close to their dad, but it is like an expectation that kids in horror movies would call for their mom. Uh,
Yeah.
so it's like that's one of the first weird things. Um, but this also could just be because they are staying at their father's house. But there's this
Yeah.
lack of love for mom, and it's seen again when Kevin mentions their mom, guessing that perhaps dad went where mom is. And Kaylee responds rather sharply, I don't want to talk about mom. She's very aggressive about it. And clearly it's a soft
Yeah.
spot. And whenever we see mom or a mom like person in the house, it's not a good time. It's
Yeah.
not a comfort to see mom. So, for a child, abuse is often seen as something inescapable and silencing, and this could be expressed through the absence of the doors and windows and later by the removal of Kaylee's mouth. The phone is disconnected because they literally cannot call for help. They're not
Yeah.
allowed. In an article on Screen Rant titled Skinamarink's Mysterious Voice Could Be Darker Than You Realize, writer Kevin Michaels hypothesizes Skinamarink doesn't give the audience many answers, but one interpretation of the mysterious voice is that it is the representative of the missing parents. The voice acts in a way that emulates abusive parents and may well serve as a stand in for the missing parents. The kids are told what to do, and if they don't do it, they are harmed. The most horrific example of the abuse is when the voice tells Kevin to stab himself in the eye, followed by a shot of blood appearing on a wall. The voice ensures the children that if they disobey, harm will be done to them anyway, such as an abusive parent might. Uh, so there's definitely like a control from this voice.
Yeah.
Later, in one of the more unsettling scenes, Kaylee finds herself upstairs at the request of the voice in the dark. She enters her parents' room and sees what appears to be her father sitting on the bed. He asks her to look under the bed, and she does. It's a tense scene of uncertainty where you're screaming at the screen for her not to look under the bed because you're like, what is under the bed? Don't look under the bed. Don't listen to them.
Yeah.
Because you're not knowing what we're going to see under there or on the bed when she comes back up. And after she looks, nothing is there, and then she's told to look again, and still she sees nothing. When she sits back up, her father is gone, but now her mother is sitting on the other side of the bed. And her mother has a disorienting and stuttering conversation with her that sounds reminiscent of a talk you'd have with your kids if you and your partner were separating, which is the start of the discomfort.
Yeah.
It's certainly not the end of the scene, but it's very much like, your dad and I love you very much, you know?
Yeah. Like, this
So it's
isn't your
kind of,
fault. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like this could be a part of the coma conversation. Like perhaps Kaylee and the mom are having this conversation in the room to explain, like maybe Kaylee feels guilty for having played
Yeah.
with Kevin, right? Although she does say
Yeah.
Kevin was playing by himself. He was sleepwalking, she says. There's also just a lot of discomfort around the mom and her presence in the film. And so YouTuber Wendigoon has a great analysis video about it titled Skinamarink, A Forgotten Nightmare that Kat and I had watched, about the
Yeah.
relationship between the mother and the kids, as well as how she remains a haunting villainous form in the film, luring the children to harm. And Wendigoon explains that the mother may have been sick and died. And that same scene of the mother in the bedroom, the mom tells Kaylee not to look. Like she like disappears and she's in
Yeah.
like the closet and she tells her not to look and you're like, don't look, Kaylee. And of
Yeah.
course she
Stop
does.
looking. Yeah.
And we hear this awful sound of like bones crunching and groans from the mother in the closet being clearly in pain. And as we linger on the darkened doorway, a hand grasps out of the darkness. It is gnarled and unwell. Later, we see a figure much like the mother in areas of the house, only seeing the back of her head, and at some point, she slowly fades into the background before things truly begin to spiral. It also could be argued that it's her voice that's beckoning them to do things, because you'd be more inclined to do it if your mother told you,
Yeah.
than if a scary voice in the dark did.
Yeah.
There's also the idea that she wasn't sick, but that she actually unalived herself. And evidence of this has been mentioned online on Reddit. A user pointed out a shot of a doll hanging from the ceiling, and later that the unsettling crunching noises they described are similar to the sound of a neck snapping, and this would insinuate that the mom had hung herself. She's most definitely gone, I think, given the Kevin's comments about how dad went with mom. It's clearly she's not here. But perhaps she took her own life and their father is dealing with that grief. This could mean the father isn't gone at all, but instead is the very monster tormenting the children and his own inability to cope with the loss of her. So it could be that he's not physically gone, but emotionally he's gone, and he has been transformed by his grief into something unrecognizable. It's also possible that it's the father who is the abuser after all. The mom is gone and could possibly have been gone at the hands of their father, whether by murder or divorce. So mom is gone and it's dad's fault. And children often see adults, especially parents, as being a stronger force, unlike themselves, perhaps even a monstrous force that is controlling their lives, sometimes like gods or superheroes, supervillains. Like not being held to the same limits that they see in themselves. So in the later half of the film, the voice in the dark tells Kevin that it took Kaylee's mouth when she was asking for her parents and wasn't doing as she was told. And the taking of her mouth could quite literally be silencing her through action so that she can't speak up about the abuse. And it's also telling them what to do the entire time. So that's a big part of it too. There's also these are two last theories that people have. I am not fans of them. I don't think they hit as hard as the other ones. They're kind of lazy. And if they are the answer, it's like lazy writing. But there is the idea that perhaps this unfortunate family have found themselves in a Lost situation. Lost being the television show about the plane crash that everyone predicted was about purgatory or limbo, only for the showrunners to agree, but also disagree, and make a really complicated, sloppy ending. Like, just own it. I can't. I hate it when shows just don't own it. Like if the people
like
guessed
Game of
it,
Thrones,
that's
they did
fine.
the same thing. Like let them guess it. It's fine. Yeah.
Exactly. Like that just means you did a good job of placing all the hints. Like I'll still be. I'll feel good instead of like give me something weird. Anyway, so some viewers hypothesize that the entire family. Or theorize that the entire family is actually dead and the children are the last to navigate this limbo to find their ultimate end, spending 571 days in the in-between before their fate is decided, suspended in a not quite comforting good place to subdue them during the decision-making. So it's like kind of a weird middle ground for children to be okay, because it's your house, but you can't leave it, and you have like your toys, but they're slowly leaving you because now we're making the decision. So then this other one, the villain all along is the unassuming child. The theory from certain Reddit users is that Kevin, this 4-year-old baby, has multiple personalities and has killed his whole family. That's just, if you dig into the archives of Ghouls episodes, I don't even know if that episode still exists, but you might find an episode about children and how incredibly unlikely it is that they do murder, and certainly not in such a sinister fashion. They don't have it in them to really understand that, and I don't.
Like, if it was to happen, it's because they don't understand the permanence, or like they think it's a game and don't realize that it's real, but it's still super unlikely.
Yeah. And for all of them, like, it just that doesn't. And he's 4. Like, what can he do?
He's a baby.
What can his hands do? He can only hold the big crayons. Like he can't. He has no dexterity.
He can barely carry juice. Like
he can't even get his own juice. I got you juice. So whichever of the explanations you find helps you through the film, they're correct. Because Kyle Edward Ball succeeds when you leave the theater, or however you're viewing the film, reduced to a child, afraid of what's right outside of your vision, lingering in the darkness and waiting to pounce. having experienced that youthful appreciation and terror of the dark, I highly enjoyed the film. Ball explains this connection to a simplistic fear in the film, saying, I think it's hard not to identify so deeply with the story because we've all been little kids at some point and we've all been afraid. I think it's a stretch to say story, but in that way, it is a unifying story with any number of endings and explanations, having us jump at the soft sounds we muted and creating figures where there had not been before.
Yeah.
So that's my little take.
Yeah, it achieves that. I feel like honestly I would have believed any of them. It does a really good job just like being surprising. You know what I mean? Like just being spooky. And like really just allow. Sometimes I don't like that. Like when they're like, "Oh, it could have been anything," and you're like, "Okay, but like, what was it?" But in this instance, I accept that as the answer, because like, yeah, I need you to tell me. It haunts me. But like, this was not one of those instances. I thought it was actually because there was so little plot in terms of like clear explanations. It was fun to have that kind of ambiguity. Where there's plenty of films where I don't feel that way, but this one's success. And it was super scary. And I will say, like, as an adult who actually is scared of the dark, like, I have been sitting here this entire time, lightly freaked out by, like, the darkness around me, and especially your background, Gabe. Like, there's a little white thing in the center of your bookcase, and I don't know what it is, and I hate it. I hate it because it feels like it's moving. It's so scary. I thought it was Charlie, and I was like, what is that? It's so scary. So, like, I am very scared of the dark. When I turn off the light, I, like, rapidly run to my door. When Isaiah was in London, I left the bathroom light on in the hallway the entire time. Like, I would not go to bed in total darkness because no, absolutely not.